The Greyhound bus rattled down the empty Texas highway, kicking up dust that hung in the air like a curtain. Inside, a woman sat alone in the back row, her face turned toward the window. She'd been riding for 3 days straight, switching buses in Oklahoma City, then Amarillo, watching the landscape change from green hills to flat brown earth that stretched forever. Her name was May, or at least that's what she told people now. The woman staring back at her in the bus window looked tired. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a simple knot, clothes that had seen better days. But it was the scar that drew attention wherever she went. A thick, jagged line that ran from her left temple down to her jawline, pale against her sun-touched skin. She'd stopped trying to hide it months ago. Scarves and makeup only made people stare harder, whispering behind their hands about what terrible thing must have happened to her. The bus driver called out the next stop. Redemption, Texas, population 812. Anyone getting off here? May reached for the battered leather satchel at her feet. Everything she owned fit inside that bag. 2 changes of clothes, a few dollars folded in an envelope, a photograph she couldn't bring herself to throw away, and a small silver locket she never wore but couldn't leave behind. "I'm getting off," she said quietly. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You sure, miss? Ain't much in Redemption. Next bus through won't be till Thursday." "I'm sure." The bus pulled up to a dusty street corner. There wasn't even a proper station, just a wooden bench under a faded sign. May stepped down onto the cracked sidewalk, her satchel in hand, and the bus pulled away with a hiss of air brakes. The heat hit her immediately. It was late afternoon in August, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer above the pavement. She looked around. Main Street stretched out in both directions, lined with low buildings that seemed to lean against each other for support. A general store, a feed shop, a diner with a red neon sign that buzzed even in daylight. At the far end of the street stood a white church with a crooked steeple. A few pickup trucks were parked at odd angles along the curb. May walked toward the general store, her boots clicking on the sidewalk. The screen door creaked when she pushed it open, and a small bell announced her arrival. Inside it was cooler, but not by much. The smell of leather and coffee filled the air. Shelves lined the walls, packed with everything from canned beans to horse medicine. An older woman stood behind the counter, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked up when May entered, and her eyes went immediately to the scar. May was used to it by now. The stare, the quick look away, the second glance to make sure they'd really seen what they thought they'd seen. "Help you with something?" the woman asked, her voice neutral but not exactly warm. "I'm looking for a place to stay. A room to rent if there's anything available." The woman studied her for a moment. "You planning on staying long?" "I don't know yet. A few weeks at least. There's the boarding house over on Cedar Street, but Mrs. Patterson is mighty particular about who she takes in." The woman's tone suggested May might not pass that particular test. "Your best bet is probably the rooms above the Dusty Rose. That's the saloon down the way. Vernon keeps a couple rooms for rent upstairs. Nothing fancy, but they're clean enough." May nodded. "Thank you. I'll try there." She bought a bar of soap and a Coca-Cola, paying with coins from her pocket. The woman made change slowly, still sneaking glances at May's face. When May left, she could feel eyes watching through the window. The Dusty Rose sat between the diner and a hardware store. It was a 2-story building with peeling paint and a wooden porch that sagged in the middle. May pushed through the door into a dim interior that smelled of beer and cigarette smoke. A few men sat at the bar, even though it was barely 4 in the afternoon. They all turned to look when she walked in. The bartender was a thick man with a handlebar mustache and rolled-up sleeves. "We don't usually get ladies in here during the day," he said, not unkindly. "I heard you might have a room to rent." "That's right. Got 2 upstairs. One's taken by Charlie. He works at the grain elevator. Other one's empty. $15 a week, paid in advance. Shared bathroom at the end of the hall." May counted out 3 weeks' rent from her envelope. The bartender, who introduced himself as Vernon, led her up a narrow staircase to the 2nd floor. The room was small and spare. A metal bed frame with a thin mattress, a wooden chair, a dresser with a cracked mirror. A single window looked out over the alley behind the building. Bathroom's that door at the end. Try to keep it clean. No cooking in the rooms, but you can use the hot plate in the hall if you need to. I serve breakfast downstairs at 7 if you want it, $2 extra a week. This is fine. Thank you. Vernon left her alone. May set her satchel on the bed and sat down beside it. The mattress springs creaked under her weight. Through the thin walls, she could hear someone coughing in the next room. Charlie from the grain elevator, probably. She was tired. Not just physically tired from 3 days on a bus, but tired in a way that went bone deep. Tired of moving. Tired of strange rooms in strange towns. Tired of being alone with secrets too heavy to share. But this was the choice she'd made. This was freedom, even if freedom looked like a hot room above a saloon in a town called Redemption. The next morning, May walked into the diner at 6:30. A handful of ranchers and working men sat at the counter, hunched over plates of eggs and bacon. A woman about May's age worked the counter, refilling coffee cups and calling orders back to someone in the kitchen. May took a seat at the end of the counter. The waitress came over, setting down a menu without making eye contact. "Coffee, please. And I was wondering if you might be hiring. I can wash dishes, wait tables, whatever you need." The waitress looked at her properly then, taking in the worn clothes and the scar. "You'd have to talk to Rita, she owns the place. She comes in around 8. May ordered toast and eggs she didn't really want, just to have a reason to stay. She ate slowly, making it last. At 8:15, a sturdy woman with red hair bustled through the door, tying an apron around her waist. "Rita? This lady here is asking about work," the waitress called out. Rita looked May over with sharp eyes. "You got experience?" "I've worked in restaurants before. I'm a hard worker and I show up on time." "Where you from?" "Lots of places. Most recently New Mexico." "Why'd you leave?" May met her gaze steadily. "I needed a change." Rita seemed to think about this. "I need someone for dishes and prep work. Kitchen gets hot as blazes and the hours are long. 6 in the morning till 2, 6 days a week. $30 a week to start. If you work out, maybe more later. I'll take it. Start tomorrow then. 6 sharp. Come through the back door." And just like that, May had a job. She had a room. She had enough money to last a few months if she was careful. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Earned with her own hands, no strings attached. The first week passed in a blur of hot water and dirty plates. May kept her head down and her hands busy. The kitchen was brutally hot, just like Rita had warned. By noon each day, May's shirt stuck to her back with sweat. But she didn't complain. She scraped plates, scrubbed pots, chopped vegetables, and mopped floors. She learned the rhythm of the diner. The morning rush of ranchers wanting breakfast before heading out to work. The slower afternoon crowd. The way everything had to be cleaned and prepped for the next day before she could leave. The other waitresses were curious about her, but kept their distance. She'd catch them whispering sometimes, glancing her way. The scar was always a conversation starter, even when people tried to pretend they weren't looking at it. On her 7th day in Redemption, May was restocking the dry goods in the supply closet when she heard Rita call out, "Morning, Jake, usual table?" "Sounds good, Rita, how's business?" "Can't complain. Coffee's fresh." May didn't think much of it. She'd learned most of the regular customers by now, at least by their orders. But when she came out of the supply closet to grab more dish soap, she saw him for the first time. He sat at a corner table by the window, a tall man in worn jeans and a clean work shirt. His hat rested on the chair beside him, revealing dark hair touched with gray at the temples. His face was weathered from sun and wind, laugh lines around his eyes. He was reading a newspaper, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him. Rita caught May looking. "That's Jake Thornton. Runs a cattle operation east of town. Good man. Always leaves a decent tip." May nodded and went back to her dishes. But later, when she carried a bin of clean glasses out to the counter, she noticed him again. He was eating scrambled eggs and hash browns, still reading his paper. There was something peaceful about him, unhurried, like he had nowhere else to be and was perfectly content right where he was. When he stood to leave, he carried his plate and cup to the counter himself, even though that wasn't expected. "Thanks, Rita. That hit the spot." "Anytime, Jake. Say hello to your aunt for me." He put on his hat and walked out, holding the door for an older couple coming in. Through the window, May watched him climb into a dusty pickup truck and drive away. "He's single, you know," Rita said, appearing at May's elbow with a knowing smile. May felt her cheeks warm. I was just..." "Relax, honey. I'm just saying. Good man like that, hard to find. He was married years back, but his wife passed. Cancer. He took care of her right up to the end. Been on his own about 5 years now." May didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and went back to work. But that evening, alone in her room above the saloon, she found herself thinking about the cowboy at the corner table. The way he'd carried his own dishes. The way he'd held the door. Small gestures, but they spoke of something. Consideration, maybe. The kind of man who noticed when someone needed a door held. She shook her head at herself. She wasn't in redemption to notice men, kind or otherwise. She was here to disappear. To be nobody. To let the world forget she'd ever existed at all. But the next morning, when she arrived at the diner at 6, Rita met her with a different assignment. Jenny called in sick. I need you to cover tables this morning. You said you could wait tables, right? May hesitated. Working in the kitchen meant staying out of sight. Waiting tables meant being seen. But she needed this job. Yes, I can do it. Rita handed her an apron and a notepad. Just smile, take orders, keep the coffee coming. You'll be fine. At exactly 7:30, Jake Thornton walked through the door, and this time when Rita called out his greeting, she pointed him to a table in May's section. May's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the coffee pot. She'd waited tables before plenty of times, but something about walking toward that corner table made her nervous in a way she couldn't quite explain. Jake was already settled in, his hat on the chair, looking out the window at the early morning street. When May approached, he glanced up and smiled. It was a genuine smile, the kind that reached his eyes, and it caught her off guard. Morning, he said simply. Good morning. Coffee? May held up the pot, hoping he wouldn't notice the slight shake in her hand. Please, black, no sugar. She poured carefully, watching the steam rise from the cup. He didn't stare at her scar. She was so used to people's eyes going there first, lingering there, that his simple nod of thanks felt almost strange. What can I get you for breakfast? She asked. Notepad ready? I'll do the ranch special. Scrambled eggs, bacon, hash browns, and some of Rita's biscuits if she's got any ready. May wrote it down. I'll put that in for you. Thank you, miss. He paused. Waiting. May, she said after a brief hesitation. May, I'm Jake. Nice to meet you. She nodded and headed back to the kitchen, sliding the order ticket through the window to the cook. Rita was watching her with that knowing expression again, but May ignored it. The morning rush picked up. Ranchers and farmhands filled the tables, everyone wanting breakfast before the heat of the day set in. May stayed busy, filling coffee cups, taking orders, delivering plates. She fell into the rhythm of it, the familiar dance of restaurant work. When she brought Jake his food, he thanked her again. I appreciate it. Let me know if you need anything else. She moved on to other tables, but she found herself aware of him somehow. The way he ate without rushing, the way he said please and thank you every time she refilled his coffee. Small things, but in May's experience, you could tell a lot about a person by how they treated people serving them. He left exact change plus a generous tip, carried his dishes to the counter again, and tipped his hat to Rita on his way out. See you tomorrow, Rita. Take care, Jake. After he left, one of the regular customers, an old rancher named Hank, chuckled into his coffee. That Jake, he's too polite for his own good. Needs a woman to shake him up a little. Rita swatted at him with a dish towel. Mind your business, Hank. But May noticed the way people talked about Jake, always with respect, often with affection. In a small town, that meant something. The next morning, Jake came in at the same time. And the morning after that, within a week, May understood it was his routine. 7:30, corner table, ranch special with scrambled eggs. He always had his newspaper, always nursed 2 cups of coffee, and always left after about 40 minutes. At first, their conversation stayed simple. Weather talk mostly. How dry it had been, whether rain was coming. The kind of safe, easy topics strangers exchange. But gradually something shifted. Jake started asking her how she was settling into redemption. If she'd found everything she needed. Small questions that showed he'd noticed she was new in town. Getting by okay? He asked one morning, looking up from his paper. Yes, thank you. Everyone's been kind. Small towns can be like that. Curious at first, but decent once they get used to you. He said it like he understood she might be getting stares, without making her spell it out. I've noticed, May said with a small smile. You like it here? Or just passing through? She hesitated. I'm not sure yet. I guess I'll know when I know. He nodded like that made perfect sense. Fair enough. Sometimes you got to let a place tell you if it's home or not. There was something easy about talking to him. He didn't push, didn't pry. just made space for conversation if she wanted it, and let silence sit comfortably if she didn't. 3 weeks into her time in redemption, Jake did something different. It was a Saturday morning and the diner was packed. May was running between tables trying to keep up with the rush. She'd just delivered a stack of pancakes to a family of 5 when she heard glass shatter. A customer had knocked over his water glass, and it had hit the floor in a spray of ice and broken glass. The man was apologizing, embarrassed, while his companions laughed it off. May grabbed a broom and dustpan, kneeling down to sweep up the mess. She was focused on getting the smallest shards, not wanting anyone to step on them, when she heard Jake's voice close by. "Here, let me help." He'd gotten up from his table and was already picking up the larger pieces, carefully depositing them in his empty water glass. "You don't have to do that," May said, surprised. "I know, but you're busy and many hands make light work, as my aunt used to say." Together, they cleaned it up in less than a minute. When May stood, Jake was already back at his table, reading his paper like nothing had happened. But he'd helped without being asked, without making a show of it. Just saw something that needed doing and did it. Rita had seen the whole thing. Later, during a quiet moment, she cornered May by the coffee station. "That man is sweeter than honey in August, and you know it." "He's just a nice person," May said, feeling her cheeks warm. And you just happen to check that corner table every time you walk by." May opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. She had been doing that. The following Wednesday, something changed again. May was wiping down tables after the morning rush when Jake finished his breakfast. But instead of leaving like usual, he lingered, turning his coffee cup slowly in his hands. "May," he said as she approached to refill his cup. "I was wondering something." She paused, pot in hand. "What's that?" "There's a community dance this Saturday night. At the church hall. Nothing fancy, just local folks, some music, potluck supper. I was thinking—" He stopped and she realized he was nervous. "Would you maybe want to go? With me, I mean." May's first instinct was to say no, to keep her distance, to remember why she'd come here. But something in the hopeful way he looked at her, in the slight uncertainty in his voice, made her hesitate. "I don't really know anyone in town," she said slowly. "That's kind of the point of these things, getting to know folks. And you wouldn't be alone. You'd be with me." He said it simply, like it was just a fact. With me. May thought about her room above the saloon, about the long, quiet evenings she spent there alone, about how she'd been running for so long she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to just live. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Yes, I'd like that." His face broke into a genuine smile, the kind that made his whole face light up. "Yeah? That's great. I'll pick you up Saturday around 6. It starts at 6:30, but I like to be on time." 6 works fine. For the rest of the day, May felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. A little flutter of anticipation, maybe even happiness. Saturday evening came too quickly. May stood in her small room looking at her reflection in the cracked mirror. She didn't have much in the way of nice clothes. She'd settled on a simple blue dress she'd bought at a secondhand store in Albuquerque. The nicest thing she owned. She'd washed her hair and let it dry naturally, falling in waves past her shoulders. The scar was still there, of course. It would always be there. She'd thought about trying to cover it somehow, but what was the point? Jake had seen it every morning for weeks. If it bothered him, he wouldn't have asked her to the dance. At 6 exactly, she heard a truck pull up outside. She grabbed her sweater and headed downstairs. Vernon gave her a knowing grin from behind the bar. "Don't you look nice? Have fun now." Jake was waiting by his truck, wearing clean jeans and a pressed shirt, his boots polished. He'd clearly made an effort. When he saw her, he took off his hat. "You look real pretty, May." "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." He opened the truck door for her, then walked around to his side. As they drove toward the church, May felt her nerves building. A room full of strangers, people who would stare at her scar, whisper about the new woman in town. She almost asked him to turn around, but then Jake said, "You nervous?" "A little," she admitted. "Me too, if I'm honest. I haven't been to one of these in a while. Since my wife passed, actually." May looked at him. Rita had mentioned he was a widower, but hearing him say it so plainly made it real. "I'm sorry. About your wife, thank you. It's been 5 years now. She was a good woman. Cancer took her fast." He was quiet for a moment. "She used to love these dances." Would drag me out even when I was tired from working. Said life was too short not to dance when you got the chance. She sounds like she was wise. She was. He glanced at May. She would have liked you, I think. She always appreciated people who'd been through hard times. Said it made folks stronger or kinder or both. They pulled up to the church hall and May could hear music already playing inside. Fiddle and guitar, something upbeat. Jake came around and opened her door. Ready? He asked, offering his hand. May took it. His hand was calloused and warm, steady. Ready? Inside, the hall was decorated with paper streamers and twinkle lights. Tables lined one wall covered with potluck dishes. At least 50 people filled the space, talking, laughing, some already dancing. May felt eyes turn toward them as they walked in. Jake seemed to sense her hesitation. He leaned close and said quietly, "Just stay with me. I'll introduce you around slow, and if you want to leave any time, we leave. No questions asked." That simple promise settled her nerves. He wasn't going to abandon her to the wolves. He'd stay beside her. True to his word, Jake introduced her to people gradually. His Aunt Patty, a warm woman who immediately complimented May's dress. A couple who ran the feed store, a family with 3 young kids who Jake seemed to know well. Each time he introduced her simply as, "My friend May." And if people's eyes lingered on her scar, Jake either didn't notice or didn't care. They filled plates from the potluck spread and found seats at one of the tables. Jake knew everyone, and everyone seemed genuinely glad to see him. May watched how people interacted with him. The respect was real. So was the affection. "You're well liked here," she observed quietly. He shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "I've lived here my whole life. Hard not to know people in a town this small. That's not what I meant. People respect you. That's earned, not given. I try to be fair and honest. Help out when I can. That's about all anyone can do, isn't it?" Before May could respond, the music shifted to something slower. Couples moved onto the dance floor. Jake set down his fork and stood, offering his hand again. "Would you dance with me, May?" She hesitated. "I should warn you, I'm not much of a dancer." "Neither am I. We'll figure it out together." She took his hand and let him lead her to the floor. He placed one hand gently at her waist, held her other hand in his, and they began to move. He was right, he wasn't fancy, but he was steady. He led her with quiet confidence, and after a few awkward steps, May relaxed into it. "See?" he said softly. "Not so bad." They swayed to the music, and May became aware of people watching. But Jake was looking at her, not at them. His eyes were kind, his expression open. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Okay. That scar on your face. Some folks might look at it and see something to pity or avoid. But when I look at it, I see someone who survived something. Someone strong enough to still be standing. That takes courage, May, real courage." May felt tears prick at her eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Most people either pretended not to see the scar or looked at her with pity. But Jake saw it and saw strength. "You don't know what happened," she said quietly. "You're right, I don't. And you don't have to tell me unless you want to. But whatever it was, you're here now. That's what matters." The song ended and another began. They kept dancing. May couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this at peace. This seen. This safe. As the evening wore on, Jake introduced her to more people. They ate pie and drank punch. They talked and laughed. When a group of older women pulled May aside to ask about her background, Jake stayed close, gently steering the conversation when it got too personal. On the drive back to town, May felt lighter than she had in months. Maybe years. "Thank you," she said as they pulled up outside the saloon. "For tonight. For all of it. Thank you for saying yes." Jake turned off the engine and looked at her. "May, I'd like to do this again. Take you out, I mean. Maybe dinner? Or a ride out to see the ranch. Only if you want to, of course." May knew she should say no. She knew getting close to anyone was dangerous. But sitting in that truck looking at Jake's honest face in the dim light, she couldn't make herself walk away. "I'd like that," she said. His smile was worth every risk. The weeks that followed felt like waking up from a long sleep. May had spent so many months just surviving, just moving from one town to the next, keeping her head down and her heart closed. But Jake was changing that slowly and gently, like spring thaw melting winter ice. He took her to dinner at a small steakhouse 2 towns over, where nobody knew either of them, and they could just be 2 people enjoying a meal together. He brought her wildflowers he'd picked from his property, showing up at the diner during her break with a mason jar full of Indian paintbrush and blue bonnets. He taught her to ride horses on Sunday afternoons, patient when she was nervous, encouraging when she finally cantered across the open field. And through it all, he never pushed. Never asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. He seemed content to know the May who existed right now in this moment, without needing to excavate her past. But the past had a way of catching up. May knew that better than anyone. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. May had just finished her shift and was walking back to her room when she passed the general store. In the window, she caught sight of a newspaper. The headline meant nothing to her, but the photograph below it stopped her cold. Her father, Benjamin Hartwell, standing in front of one of his oil derricks, looking powerful and untouchable like he always did. May's hands went cold. She stepped closer to the window, reading the caption. Some business deal? An expansion of operations. The article mentioned his vast holdings across Texas and New Mexico, his influence in state politics, his reputation as a ruthless businessman. It didn't mention his daughter, the one who disappeared 3 years ago, the one who had a scar on her face because she dared to say no to him. May turned away from the window, her heart pounding. She'd been careful. She'd changed her name, dyed her hair darker, stayed away from big cities where someone might recognize her, but seeing his face, even in a photograph, brought it all rushing back. The fear, the anger, the shame. She made it to her room and sat on the bed, shaking. For the first time since coming to Redemption, she seriously considered leaving, packing her satchel and catching the next bus out, disappearing again before anyone could connect her to the Hartwell name. But then she thought about Jake, about the way he smiled when he saw her, about the life they were building together, fragile and new as it was. Could she really walk away from that? That night she barely slept. By morning, she'd made a decision. If this thing with Jake was going to be real, if it was going to mean anything, he needed to know the truth. Not all of it maybe, but enough. Enough to understand who she really was and where she'd come from. The next Sunday, Jake picked her up for their usual ride. But instead of heading to his ranch, May asked if they could go somewhere quiet, somewhere they could talk. He drove them out to a spot he knew, a hillside overlooking a creek. The cottonwood trees were turning gold, and the afternoon sun made everything look soft and warm. They sat on a blanket he kept in the truck, and for a long moment May just looked at the view, gathering her courage. "There's something I need to tell you," she said finally, "about where I come from, about how I got this." She touched her scar. Jake turned to face her, his expression serious. "You don't owe me anything, May. Your past is yours." "I know. But I want to tell you, you deserve to know who you're spending time with." He waited, patient as always, while she found the words. "My name wasn't always May," she began. "I was born Elena Hartwell." She watched his face for recognition. The Hartwell name carried weight in Texas, especially in oil and cattle country. But Jake just listened, waiting for her to continue. "My father is Benjamin Hartwell. Maybe you've heard of him. Oil, land, politics. He's what people call a powerful man." She said it with bitterness she couldn't hide. "I've heard the name," Jake said carefully. May took a breath. "I grew up with everything money could buy. Big house, private schools, fancy parties. But my father, he didn't see me as a daughter. He saw me as an asset, something to be used to make business deals and strengthen alliances." She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "When I was 28, he arranged a marriage for me. To the son of one of his business partners, a man named Richard Crane. My father didn't ask if I wanted to marry him. He just announced it like he was announcing a merger." Jake's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. "I told him no. I'd met Richard a few times. He was cruel, the kind of man who hurt people because he enjoyed it. I knew if I married him, my life would be worse than any prison." May's voice caught. "My father didn't take no for an answer. He said I was being selfish, ungrateful, that I owed him for everything he'd given me." She touched her scar again, the gesture almost unconscious now. "We fought. Really fought, not just argued. He was so angry, angrier than I'd ever seen him. He grabbed a riding crop from the wall, the kind used for horses, said he'd teach me to be obedient." May closed her eyes, the memory still sharp after 3 years. "He hit me with it. The metal tip caught my face and just tore right through. There was so much blood. Jake's hand found hers, warm and steady. He just stood there, looking at what he'd done. And you know what he said? May's voice was hollow. He said I'd ruined myself. That Richard wouldn't want me now, looking like that. Like the scar was the problem, not what he'd done to put it there. May, Jake said softly, but she shook her head. Let me finish. I need to get it all out. She squeezed his hand. That night, after the doctor came and stitched me up, after my father went to bed like nothing had happened, I packed a bag. I took some cash from my bedroom safe, left everything else, and walked out. I've been running ever since. She finally looked at Jake. I changed my name. Changed everything about myself. Because I knew if he found me, he'd drag me back, and I'd rather die than go back to that life. The silence stretched between them.
May waited for him to pull away, to stand up and say this was too much, too complicated.
She was the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the state. Getting involved with her was asking for trouble, but Jake didn't move away. Instead, he shifted closer, turning to face her fully. First thing, he said, his voice firm, what your father did to you, that's not just wrong. That's evil. No man should ever lay hands on his daughter like that. No person should hurt someone they're supposed to protect. May felt tears starting to well up. Second thing, you're not running anymore, May. You're here because you chose to be here. There's a difference between running away from something and walking towards something better. But if he finds out where I am, then we'll deal with it. Together. Jake cupped her face gently, his thumb careful near her scar. You're not alone anymore. You understand me? Whatever comes, we face it together. The tears spilled over then, and May let them come. Jake pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried, not pitying her, not treating her like she was broken, just being there, solid and steady and safe. When the tears finally stopped, May pulled back, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry. I don't usually fall apart like that. You've been carrying this alone for 3 years. I'd say you're entitled to fall apart a little. He smiled gently. Feel better? Actually, yes, and she did. Lighter somehow, like putting down a heavy weight she'd been carrying. Can I ask you something? Jake said. Anything. Do you regret it? Leaving all that behind? The money, the comfort, all of it? May thought about it, really thought about it. Not for a second. I'd rather have nothing and be free than have everything and be trapped. That's not really living, Jake. That's just existing in a fancy cage. He nodded like he understood completely. I grew up with nothing. Still don't have much, if I'm honest. My ranch is small, the work is hard, and some months I barely break even. But it's mine. I built it with my own hands, and nobody can take that from me. That's worth more than all my father's oil wells, May said. I think so too. Jake stood and helped her up. Come on, there's something I want to show you. They drove to his ranch, something May had only seen from a distance before. It wasn't much, he was right about that. A modest house, weathered but well-maintained. A barn that had seen better days but was sturdy. Fences that ran in neat lines across rolling hills. Maybe 100 head of cattle grazing in the distance. But as they walked the property, Jake pointing out repairs he'd made, talking about his plans for the future, May saw something her father's empire had never had. Pride in honest work. Satisfaction in building something yourself instead of taking it from others. It's not fancy, Jake said, almost apologetic. It's beautiful, May said, and she meant it. It's real. They ended up on his porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jake brought out lemonade and they sat in comfortable silence watching the day end. May, Jake said eventually, I want you to know something. I don't care who your father is or what name you were born with. When I look at you, I see a woman who had the courage to choose freedom over comfort. That takes more strength than most people have. You don't think I'm running away? Being a coward? Running away would be easier. You could have married that man, lived in luxury, never had to wash dishes or worry about rent. But you chose the hard path, the honest path. That's not cowardice, May. That's bravery. May leaned her head on his shoulder. How are you this good? This understanding? He laughed softly. I'm not perfect. I'm stubborn and I work too much and I'm not good at talking about feelings most times. But I know what real looks like. And you're real, May. More real than most people I've met. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of my father finding me, though that scares me too. I'm scared of this, of us. I haven't let myself care about anyone in so long. I'm scared too, Jake said. Lost my wife 5 years ago and I thought that was it for me. Thought I'd had my chance at love and I should just be grateful for the time we had. But then you walked into that diner and something in me woke up again. He turned to face her. I'm not asking you to promise me forever right now. I'm not asking you to make any big decisions. I'm just asking you to stay, to give this a chance, to let yourself be happy even if it's scary. May thought about the women she could have been. Elena Hartwell, trapped in a loveless marriage, living a lie. A nameless drifter, always moving, never staying long enough to build anything real. Or May, here in redemption with a man who saw her scars and called them beautiful. Okay, she said. I'll stay. Jake's smile was worth every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. There's one more thing, May said. If we're really doing this, if we're really giving this a chance, there can't be secrets between us. You need to know that if my father ever finds me, it won't just be me he comes after. Anyone close to me becomes a target. He's that vindictive. Then we'll be ready, Jake said simply. You're not facing him alone anymore. As the stars began to appear overhead, May felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have a life here. A real life, built on truth and trust and love that saw her for who she really was. She'd been running for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand still, to put down roots, to be home. But sitting on that porch with Jake, watching the night settle over his modest ranch, May realized something profound. Home wasn't a place. It wasn't a mansion or a town or even 4 walls and a roof. Home was feeling safe enough to tell the truth. Home was someone seeing all of you, even the broken parts, and choosing to stay anyway. For the first time in 3 years, May felt like she'd found her way home. The months that followed were the happiest May could remember. She kept working at the diner, kept living in her room above the saloon, but everything felt different now. Lighter. She didn't jump at every unfamiliar face, didn't plan escape routes in her head anymore. For the first time since leaving her father's house, she allowed herself to just live. Jake was part of her daily routine now. Morning coffee at the diner before he headed out to work his cattle. Sunday rides through the countryside. Quiet evenings on his porch talking about everything and nothing. He introduced her to more people in town, and slowly, May became part of the fabric of redemption. Not the mysterious woman with the scar anymore. Just May, who worked hard, made decent coffee, and was seeing Jake Thornton. Winter came to Texas, mild but enough to need a jacket in the evenings. May was closing up the diner one December afternoon when Jake appeared at the door, hat in hand, looking nervous in a way she hadn't seen before. You okay? She asked, wiping down the last table. Yeah, fine, just, can you take a walk with me? Something in his voice made her heart pick up speed. Sure, let me grab my coat. They walked down Main Street as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Jake was quiet, which wasn't unusual, but there was an energy about him that was different. When they reached the small park at the edge of town, he led her to a bench under an old oak tree. May, he started, then stopped, took off his hat and turned it in his hands. I've been thinking about something for a while now. Actually, I've been thinking about it since about the second week I knew you, but I wanted to make sure, wanted to do this right. May's heart was racing now. She had an idea where this was going, but she didn't want to assume. Jake set his hat aside and took both her hands in his. I love you, May. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you never complain even when the work is hard. I love how you see the good in people, even after everything you've been through. I love waking up knowing I get to see you that day. Tears were already forming in May's eyes. I know you came here to start over, to be free. And I want you to know that I'm not trying to trap you or own you or any of that. But I'm hoping... He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I'm hoping you might want to build a life with me. A real life, as partners, as equals. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond, nothing flashy but beautiful in its honesty. May, will you marry me? For a moment, May couldn't speak. Her throat was tight with emotion. She thought about everything that had brought her to this bench, this moment, this man, the violence she'd fled, the fear she'd carried, the loneliness of always moving, never settling, never letting anyone close. And then she thought about Jake. Patient, kind, steady Jake, who'd seen her at her lowest and never once made her feel less than whole, who'd heard her story and hadn't run, who was offering her not a cage but a partnership. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Jake, I'll marry you. His face lit up like sunrise, and he slipped the ring on her finger. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, gentle and sure. while the last light of day faded around them. They were married on a Saturday in February, at the little church in Redemption. May wore a simple white dress she'd bought from a store in the next town over. Jake wore his best suit, the one he'd been married in before, which his Aunt Patty had insisted he could wear again because his first wife would have wanted him to be happy. The whole town turned out. Rita closed the diner for the day to attend. Vernon from the saloon walked May down the aisle since she had no family to do it. The ceremony was short and sweet, and when the preacher said Jake could kiss his bride, the whole church erupted in applause. At the reception in the church hall, May felt overwhelmed by the warmth of it all. These people, who'd been strangers just months ago, had embraced her. They brought casseroles and pies, danced with her, wished her well. Nobody asked about her family or why they weren't there. In small towns, people understood that sometimes family was what you made, not what you were born with. May and Jake moved into his ranch house together. It was modest compared to what May had grown up with, but she'd never been happier. She quit her job at the diner to help Jake full-time on the ranch. She learned to mend fences, help with calving season, keep the books. Her hands, once soft and manicured, became calloused and strong. They worked side by side every day, building their life together. Jake taught her everything he knew about ranching, never talking down to her, always patient when she made mistakes. And May discovered she loved it. Loved the physical work, the connection to the land, the satisfaction of taking care of the animals. Evenings, they'd sit on the porch and talk about their dreams. Maybe expanding the herd, fixing up the barn, one day maybe children. May had never let herself think about the future before, but with Jake she could imagine it. Could see a life stretching out ahead of them, full of ordinary, beautiful moments. 6 months into their marriage, on a hot August afternoon, May was in town picking up supplies when she saw the black car. It was parked outside the general store, sleek and expensive and completely out of place in Redemption. May's blood went cold. She knew that kind of car. Had grown up around them. Cars that said money and power and East Coast lawyers. She considered turning around, heading straight back to the ranch, pretending she hadn't seen it. But she was tired of running, and she'd promised Jake no more secrets. May walked into the general store with her head high. 2 men in suits stood at the counter talking to the store owner. They had briefcases and that particular look that lawyers always had, like they knew something you didn't. One of them turned as May entered. He was older, gray-haired, with sharp eyes that took in everything. Those eyes landed on May's face, on her scar, and something flickered in his expression. Recognition. "Miss Hartwell," he said. The store went silent. May felt everyone's eyes on her. The owner, the other customers, all of them hearing that name, Hartwell, and wondering. "My name is May Thornton," she said steadily. The lawyer's expression softened slightly. "Of course, Mrs. Thornton, my apologies. My name is George Mitchell. I'm an attorney with Mitchell and Associates. We've been looking for you for quite some time." May's heart pounded, but she kept her voice calm. "Why? Perhaps we could speak somewhere private. Anything you need to say, you can say here." May wasn't going anywhere alone with these men. Mitchell exchanged a glance with his companion, then nodded. "Very well. Mrs. Thornton, I'm sorry to inform you that your father, Benjamin Hartwell, passed away 2 weeks ago." The world tilted. May grabbed the counter to steady herself. Her father, dead. She'd spent 3 years running from him, fearing him, and now he was just gone. "I don't understand," she managed. "Why are you here? Your father's will is quite clear. Despite your estrangement, you are his only child and sole heir. His entire estate has been left to you." May laughed, a sharp sound with no humor in it. "No, I don't want it. Give it to charity or the state or whoever handles these things. I want nothing from that man." "I'm afraid it's not that simple," Mitchell said gently. "The estate is valued at approximately $200 million. It includes oil operations, cattle ranches, commercial real estate, and land holdings across Texas and New Mexico. You own quite literally half the state. The numbers were too big to process." May shook her head. "You don't understand. I left that world. I built a new life. I don't want his money. The law doesn't particularly care what you want, Mrs. Thornton. You are the legal heir. The estate will transfer to you whether you claim it or not." Mitchell pulled papers from his briefcase. "However, what you do with it once it's yours is entirely your decision. You could liquidate it, donate it, manage it yourself, or hire people to run it while you continue your life here. But the assets are yours. May looked down at her hands, the simple gold wedding band on her finger. The calluses from ranch work, the dirt under her fingernails from this morning's chores. She wasn't Elena Hartwell anymore. She was May Thornton, rancher's wife, but Elena Hartwell's past had just caught up with her anyway. I need to talk to my husband, May said finally. Of course. Here's my card. We're staying at the hotel 2 towns over for the next few days. Whenever you're ready to discuss the details, just call. Mitchell handed her a business card. And Mrs. Thornton, for what it's worth, your father left a letter for you. I have it in the car. Would you like me to bring it? May's first instinct was to say no, but curiosity won out. Yes. Mitchell returned with a sealed envelope, her name written on it in her father's distinctive handwriting. May took it with shaking hands. After the lawyers left, May sat in her truck for a long time just staring at the envelope. Part of her wanted to tear it up without reading it. But another part, the part that had been his daughter once, needed to know what he had to say. She drove back to the ranch, the envelope burning a hole in her pocket. Jake was in the barn and he took one look at her face and put down his tools. What happened? May told him everything. The lawyers, her father's death, the inheritance. She handed him the business card, let him see the impossible numbers for himself. Jake was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "How are you feeling?" "I don't know," May's voice cracked. "I hated him, Jake, for what he did to me, for how he treated me. But he was still my father, and now he's gone, and I don't know what I'm supposed to feel." Jake pulled her into his arms. "You feel whatever you feel. There's no right way to grieve, even for someone who hurt you." They walked back to the house together. On the porch, May finally opened the letter. Her father's handwriting was shakier than she remembered, but still recognizable. "Elena," it began, and May almost stopped reading right there, but she forced herself to continue. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. What I did to you was unforgivable. I was a cruel man, driven by pride and power, and I destroyed the one pure thing in my life, my relationship with my daughter. I've spent the last 3 years looking for you, not to drag you back, but to apologize. To tell you that you were right to leave, that you deserved better than I ever gave you. The cancer gives a man time to think about his regrets, and you are my greatest one. I'm leaving you everything because it should have been yours all along. Not as a cage, but as a tool. You have your mother's heart. The heart I tried to crush out of you. Use this money to do the good I never did. Be the person I couldn't be. You owe me nothing, but I hope someday you can find peace with what happened between us. I hope you found happiness wherever you are. Your father, Benjamin." May read it twice, tears streaming down her face. It didn't erase what he'd done. It didn't take away the scar or the years of fear, but it was something. An acknowledgement. An apology, however late. Jake read it over her shoulder, then pulled her close. "What do you want to do?" May looked out at their small ranch, at the life they'd built together with their own hands. Then she thought about the vast empire that was now impossibly hers. "I want to talk to those lawyers," she said slowly. "Because I think I have some ideas." Jake smiled. "That's my girl." That night, lying in bed, May stared at the ceiling while Jake slept beside her. Tomorrow she'd meet with the lawyers. Tomorrow she'd start figuring out what to do with an empire she'd never wanted. But tonight she was just May Thornton, lying next to the man she loved, in the home they'd made together. And somehow that simple truth made everything else seem manageable. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Just like they'd promised.